Welcome back to the Story Deep Dive podcast with Dana and Rachel. And y'all, we are coming to the end of our teaspoon of conversation about Ninth House. I'm going to get her name right, by Leigh Bardugo. Did I say it right?
Killing it.
Listen, you said the whole name as if it's one name. Listen.
Oh, it's because I talk too fast and slur my words together. It's careless speech. I'm sorry.
Okay, so we are coming to the end of this discussion, and I'm really looking forward to sort of wrapping this baby up with a bow. And one of the things that we talked about pre-recording this episode was this was Rachel's book selection, and in the beginning, I was not feeling this book. I was not feeling this book. It wasn't the book's fault. It was just not my sort of jam. I trusted her. I kind of did trust her. I kind of didn't trust her. I didn't know whether I could trust her. She was on shaky ground. When I saw a ghost pop out, I was like, wait a minute, what are we doing? And it was to the point where I was giving her late night text messages and I was calling her during my morning walks because I didn't understand what had happened was. And, but as we get into this last episode, and even after having these conversations, talking about the plot, talking about the characters, or really Alex, who's just a monster character, and now sort of wrapping this up a little bit, it makes me appreciate it more. So I'm telling Rachel she did a good job. She better put this down in the books. That this was a great book. And honestly, I'm looking forward to reading it again. And before we sort of get into that wrap up, what are some of the things that you got going on in your world that sort of is keeping you moving? Because we are recording this around the holiday season. So what's going on in your world before we dive into this final conversation about Ninth House?
Okay, listen, I'm actually really excited because I'm getting ready for for our next book pick.
Yes.
Can I
already started? Go ahead.
Yeah, because you already told me what it was. Can I spoil it? Can I tell?
Yes, you can spoil it.
Okay, listen. So this is I'm so excited for this podcast because it is such a fun exercise in contrast. So this month we did Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. Next month we are doing The Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. And I love it because it's like we are going the full opposite direction. As far opposite as we can, we're doing it. We're going.
Oh my God.
So I started rereading it, which I love it because it's a fun, for me, during the holidays, what a fun, light, experience, right? To just enjoy, Lucy Score created such a fun world and Knockabout. And so I'm really, that doesn't really, it kind of has to do with my business because it's for the podcast, but I'm just pumped to be reading it because I started it yesterday. I'm having a good time. I was having so much fun. And what's hilarious is this is going to live next to a book about the Watergate scandal.
Oh my gosh. Listen, I'll say Rachel's low-key talking about her bougie reading standards next to my entertainment reads, but it's okay.
No, that meant it was a heavy book, and Lucy Score is a fun book.
Lucy Score is going to have to hold us down sandwiched between books 1 and 3. She is probably the only one that would have been able to stand up to this challenge that you are presenting for us. Because, baby, I need to start on the book 3 17 years ago, but it's okay. But so you started reading it again. I always find that it's so interesting, which we'll probably talk about more than once, during our discussion about things we never got over. And my students are probably going to be like, Lord, she didn't had this book a million times. I think it is a really great example of a romance. But I also love, I'm looking forward to having the discussion with you and being able to watch your face as we talk about a romance
All clutching for days. That's all you need. It's just good
Clutching. There will be no pearls. They will be on the floor. They will be pulled. Listen, you will probably want to listen to those episodes and watch the video because I just have a feeling Rachel's going to be beat red.
Oh, well, it depends. How much are we going to talk about the steamy scenes? Can you prep me now?
No. Why would I?
We're going to get that explicit tag. That's what, guys, this is it. This is the podcast. This series is the one that's going to get us the explicit tag.
You just had me reading about ghosts. Okay. So whatever it is, you should be down for whatever it is I want to do.
You made me read about roasts. I can make you read about sex. Get over it.
Chandelier swinging in the house.
My favorite thing, okay, this is a little like background into Dana and my relationship. One of my favorite things that's ever happened is I don't remember which book we were talking about. I don't know like what the context was. I just remember we were talking about romance and I was like, oh my goodness. And Dana said, Rachel, you are a married woman. What is going on over there?
Baby, listen, grown folks stuff. You know what grown people do? I was like, ma'am, what book was it? No, it wasn't. I was thinking that it was, oh goodness, vampires.
Oh, Dead Until Dark?
Was it Dead Until Dark? No, it wasn't Dead Until Dark.
It was a different vampire book?
No. I mean, the vampire was that, but that wasn't the day when we had that conversation. It was another book that we were reading, and I can't remember what. But yes, y'all listen. I think first of all, thank you for starting early. It's a book that you need to start early because it is a thumper. It is a door stopper. It's a good one, but it's a door stopper.
500 pages of Viking goodness, apparently.
Come on, grouchy Viking. That's all.
Oh, we love a grouchy main male lead. Never gets old. And that's not sarcasm. I really mean it.
Listen, dogs. Lots of dogs. If you want to listen, have a big, bad, scruffy man with dogs there. It's...
I promise eventually we're going to get to talking about night.
They're like, am I the right episode? You are.
Oh, we just can't keep it together. Dana, please tell me what you got going on in your life. Please, just
less than you. Listen to over. Oh my gosh. First of all, I really think that after this discussion, I really do want to read this book again. Like as I started, like I was against it. Rachel was, listen, she was over here breaking it down like it was a dissertation so that I would continue because I was almost on the hell no, we won't go bus. I was on the bus with my keys. I was going to be driving the bus. Whoever gets left. And she was really trying to talk me down like, you're going to love this book. I was like, I did not sign up for this. And so I was that friend. However, one of the things that I realize as a reader, because I am an entertainment reader when it comes to my reading selections for myself, that once I start feeling the character more, it's like I'm in there. And that's how I feel about this character. I think even when you were talking a little bit about the fact for your Substack going to do Mistborn next, I really feel like it's so interesting to me for me to be in a genre that majority like the way women are sort of written and not in a bad way because I love it, but I think it's a very interesting contrast to the experience of like Alex and, oh my God, I can't think of her name from Mistborn. Give me her name. Vin. Oh, I love Vin. And Vin and even when we have our discussion about characters, it made me think about how Vin used to do the same things, sort of like Alex, but she was a quiet, still presence, almost as if trying to make herself invisible, right? And I think there is something to be said about reading in other genres even if I'm all for the sexy times and the chandelier swinging, it is so amazing to be able to look at this and absorb this and find ways as a writer to convey that same feeling, that same conviction and willingness to sort of hang in there with the characters. And so, like, we'll be laughing about it, but I do think this is a great pick. It was a great pick. And I'm looking forward to your editor's takes on this. And so as we get ready to transition our conversation, as a reminder, we are not covering everything in this. And now I'm not. I don't even want to call it an analysis. It is in some regards, but it really isn't fully. What I think I would love to know how Rachel will respond to this. But my desire, both as a writer and an editor, is to help you start to think as a writer. To think about the different ways in which you decide to get to the place where you are ready to write your story. And what are some of the questions that you can ask yourself, whether you're plotting or you're editing, that can help you to sort of just get in the pocket and truly show your tail in that story, like just wow out. And I think authors miss a great opportunity if you don't read outside of your area. And so that's why she drags me kicking and screaming, but she don't have to drag me long, I don't think. Because what it allows you to do is it's almost like it's like a little bit of a culture shock, and it's getting exposure. And then you can say, what are some of the things that really call to me? What are some things that challenge me as a writer and a storyteller? And so I'm hoping that you get a little bit of that, like your spidey sense is starting to tingle, and it makes you want to reach for something to write with, and it makes you curious to continue on this journey with us. And so what about you? What are some of the things that you would like for listeners to take away from these conversations?
Yeah, I think, one of the reasons we're able to do this podcast together is because, not just because we're friends, not just because we could talk for hours, recording or not, as all listeners and viewers can probably gather by this point. But really, yeah, I think it's both encouraging, because it's important to read in your own genre. That just goes without saying, to expose yourself to other writers, to other styles, to learn about your own genre. But I do think that, I think that learning how to, and you use this phrase, and I love this phrase. I think it just hits the nail right on the head, right? Learning to read like a writer, right? Mm-hmm. So really, I think that it is a skill to learn how to read books with an approach or with a view toward learning from them. And I think that's something that I really would love to see listeners take away from the podcast, is getting more of an understanding of how to read books and understand how to look at them and how to think about them in a way that's going to help you write. Because I think that once you unlock that, the whole world just opens up, because now all of a sudden, when you're planning your book or writing your book, you have like this treasure trove of questions and approaches and thoughts and considerations to pull from, to really pull into your story and make it better, and to, like, just like you said, like, really nail your story, because you have these tools at your disposal, and you have, rather than feeling stumped, you have all these different ways that you can think about it, so that when you need to develop a story or a character or an aspect or a subplot or whatever, you have tools that you can pull from to help you do that. As well as, like, the selection, I love the variety of reading, where we have fun, sexy, romantic stories that are phenomenal entertainment reads, and we also have just honestly, like, heavier stuff. Like, you've got like gritty Rachel books that, like, are a different end of the spectrum. But I think that learning how to read outside your genre, and how to, for me, honestly, even as an act of appreciating the art of writing, in all of the different forms that it takes. I think that is, do you technically have to appreciate all the different forms of writing? No, but I think it makes it better. And I think it makes us better as creatives and as people who get outside of our comfort zone and learn to appreciate different kinds of art that maybe aren't the kind that we would normally choose to consume. And I think that's really valuable just as a practice in itself.
I agree. I will say that, yeah, I'd love, which is why we have that workshop, and it's in every single program that I've created. Reading like a writer is game changing. I always say that it makes it so that the best writers in the world become your mentors. And and it's a way to get better, but in a way that feels authentic to you through inspiration. And listen, and we get to do it with giggles and grins, and we get to have a good time, which we're about to do now as we jump into this. But I hope that as you all are listening to this, that it helps you to like want to dive into your story, or pick up a book that you haven't read before, or pick up one of the selections that we're talking about, and allow that to give you inspiration with writing your next short story, novella, novel, epic novel. If you're gonna do it, do the daggone thing. So with that said, we're getting into the editor's takes for Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. Did I say it right?
You nailed it. Perfection.
How many times a day I'm going to say, did I say it right? How many times I need to get it right?
So as many as it takes, because you got there. Daggone it.
Listen, she probably was like, Dana, my name is not that hard. It's not that hard. So we're going to talk about the editor's take on this story, and this is not meant to be everything, nor to replace our previous episodes, but I'm hoping that it sort of grounds us, because we cannot cover everything. And so before we get into the nitty gritty, Rachel is going to give our summary again. I feel like me in the need for this summary, but she's going to give us our summary again for Ninth House. And then we're going to dive in.
All right. I feel like anybody who's listened to every single episode is going to maybe be able to like recite it off by heart, like the Girl Scout oath. I don't know if this is Girl Scouts or is this I volunteer as tribute. I don't remember. I think.
Oh, that's the bell.
Nope, that's not the one. That's not the one. Love you. That's not the one. But so I feel like the listeners are like, when Alex Stern, it's like the Pledge of Allegiance. So summary, one last time for you guys. When Alex Stern, a troubled young woman with an uncanny ability to see ghosts, is discovered by the magical underground, she is enrolled into Yale University on a full ride and inducted into a secret society that monitors other secret societies that specialize in different forms of magic. This gritty tale has murder, mystery, and intrigue that explores the thirst for knowledge, justice, and the price we are willing to pay for power. So, let's start by recapping the discussions from plot and anchoring ourselves in the genre, right? So we talked about during the plot episode that this story really at its heart is a crime story. So the primary thrust of this story is about solving the murder of Tara Hutchins, and our scenes are driven by the pursuit of that goal, right? The pursuit of that knowledge. So in most every scene, Alex is looking for clues, looking for information that's going to help her find who killed Tara Hutchins, and she either gets or doesn't get that information, but what happens in the scene kind of leads her into those next steps that drives her, right, that continues to drive the investigation forward. And it kind of is stretched so that the investigation is complex enough and the hoops that Alex has to jump through are substantial enough that it draws the story out so that we get to explore all the different, we'll say many of the different facets of Alex's character. So takeaway number one, plot-wise, well, let me back up. Let me talk about what you should read the story for.
Mm-hmm.
Does that seem about right?
Yeah, because we have the genre, and I think knowing because of the lens in which we're looking at these stories, the who should read these stories beyond what we're talking about right now, I think will also be grounding as you listen to this and say, oh, that's the kind of story I want to tell, or oh, that's a skill that I want to get a little bit stronger on as we use this as inspiration. So definitely.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So, number one, I think if you're writing a crime story, even if it's a non-fantasy crime story, this is a great one because it does have all of the elements of a crime story and it has great narrative drive. And that's something that if you're writing a crime story, you're going to need. And I think it's good to see. So I have all my crime clients read this book because it is a really strong crime story. And so it's great even if you're not writing a crime story, if you are especially writing a story in a fantasy setting, but I think any setting, to explore how the setting shapes the way that the plot unfolds. Like if you really want to innovate in the genre that you're writing, and use your context to shape the way that story unfolds, this is a great story to study for that, even to track the phenomenon of how the setting itself impacts the way that the plot unfolds. I also would say if you are writing book one of a series and you have a protagonist that we are going to spend the entire series following, this is a great look at a book one and sort of as like point 3A, book one, and for exploring a character, like a very nuanced, complex character that we could actually hang out with to explore for 3 books. Those are some of the kind of like high level things that if you are wanting to achieve any of those things, so if you want to develop a nuanced character, or if you are developing a character that is going to be a series protagonist that's going to grow over the course of 3 books, if you're writing a crime story, or if you want to take a deeper look at how your setting can inform the way your plot unfolds, those are probably my big high level reasons to read this book.
And I would want to do like a little piggyback on the one about setting. I totally agree. The thing about setting too, which we didn't go into a lot, I felt like in some ways, as someone who primarily reads romance, it reminded me of like urban fiction, right? In that you have this dance between the contemporary setting and the sort of fantastical elements, right? You had the thing that you saw, and she did so beautifully of having the contemporary setting on this college campus, and even, going to the cafeteria to eat. But around them are ghosts, right? And I think there's something to be said about how she balances that. And if you find that you're writing a story where you have that sort of interplay between modern contemporary story while at the same time having fantasy woven in, I think it really does it's done beautifully. And even how she structures some of the secondary characters and the roles in which and how she built the I keep calling them secret magical houses is what you called it. I keep calling them secret societies, whatever they are. And
they're also that. So,
So that's just a part of it. And so, yeah, but I totally agree on that. That it is, that would be a master class definitely in that as well.
Yeah, definitely. If you're writing urban fantasy, this is one to look at. An urban fantasy, again, in a contemporary context, and the way that she blends those two things together, definitely add that to your list. If that's your setting, this is one to read. Mm-hmm. All right. So shall we talk about some of our plot and character takeaways?
Yes.
All right. So I think the 2 big plot takeaways, I'm trying to like narrow them down to be nice and specific, so that I don't just like take the opportunity to be like, here are all the things that I didn't get to say over the last 2 episodes that I need to squeeze in here. But to really like hone in on what is actionable here. So my 2 big plot takeaways, and then I'll ask you maybe what your plot takeaways are, would be number 1, know what the core of your story is, right? The central plot is, and build your subplots around your core plot. So this story does that really well. And I think that this is a story to study, to see that in action. So knowing what the central plot is so that everything else builds on top of and contributes to that central plot is a hugely important thing, especially if you do have multiple mysteries, if you have, if you're juggling subplots, right? This is a huge skill for keeping your story focused and using those subplots to elevate the story rather than make it feel like it's all over the place. And the other big takeaway from this book is going to be using the plot to drive your character's transformation. So using the plot to challenge your protagonist in whatever it is, in whatever way that they need to grow, and essentially tailoring the plot to drive the character's transformation. So whatever it is that your protagonist needs to encounter in order to grow, the plot should be putting them face to face with those things and backing them into corners and challenging them specifically to enable them to grow. What are your maybe big plot type takeaways for this book?
That last one is so important. Like in my mind, I can visualize like if you were on a continuum line and you had those different, especially those big scenes, that there's like this big vertical slice perpendicular of like all the different levels in which we're exploring, even if it's going from being what is seen to what is unseen, the internal versus the external, the real world versus the magical world. And I think she just did that so beautifully. Another thing that I feel like it's a mixture of plot, but also in our reason why you would want to study this that I remembered as you were talking, which is the time hopping, I say time hopping and it makes it sound bad. But if you are really playing with a story where you are utilizing the backstory to also drive what's going on in the present day, and it is probably more closely intertwined with the character, but it's probably the one thing that will connect all three of the things that we're talking about, right? And so I would say that I also find that because this series is not done and we don't know whether it's 3 or 4 books or whatever, I think it's going to be a very interesting conversation about what her true arc is, whether it is a redemptive arc, and it will be in some regards, but I think it's going to be interesting to see where that goes as far as the plot is concerned on that. But I think in general, those are the big ones. And I feel like it was one more thing. No, I think it'll come back later. But the thing, and I don't know where this will go, and I believe it will go with plot, is it's almost as if in this story, she has levels or veils. Like you have what's seen and unseen in this continuum, but then she even has those moments where she dips and goes to hell, essentially, or wherever she went. And I think there's something that's to be said about that when you are plotting and how she plans to utilize that almost as a sneak peek and as a precursor to where the story is going, that it really did support what was going on in this story, but it was almost the almost like being the inciting incident for what is to come, and that is a plot consideration. So it's I guess I would say understanding where you're taking your series and what this book one in this case represents for the overarching arc that is carrying us from book to book, but then still being very clearly said that there is some closing, right? There is the murder is solved. Like we know what happens. It's wrapped up tight with a bow, but there's still other things lurking out there. And I think she just did that so well that it does make me feel more willing to continue. And sometimes that can be a little shaky. And I think it also meant that for this book, it's a continuation, but it's not a hard cliffhanger, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that if you're someone who's writing a trilogy or something like that, which may go to that, you may want to look at that, because that's a decision that you have to make with your promise to your readers as far as what that cliffhanger looks like. And so in this case, she was able to do it where it was sort of like a soft cliffhanger that ends, but shows us that there is still another mission out there for Alex to continue, not just for her personal growth, but to do the work that she came to do as Dante. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I just want to sort of emphasize, if you are writing a trilogy or a series, this is such a good study in how to develop a book one, particularly if you don't intend to use just like a plain old cliffhanger at the end, right? Like, because I think I find, especially in fantasy, that this is how trilogies are most often done, is that we have a hint that there's another book coming. So we know that there's more conflict either to be dealt with or there's more conflict on the way. But book one closes the loop. There is a thing that we set out to do on book one, and we get some closure of whether or not that thing is done and what that means moving forward. And so, but she also, to your point, she gives us hints about what's to come. Like we don't know it's happening in the moment when we're reading it, but she's leaving these little pockets open that we are going to explore in future books. And this is such a great, so if you read Ninth House and Hellbent, if you're wanting to create a series, now we don't know how it ends, we don't know what happens in book 3, so it is incomplete at the time of this recording, but if you want to think about how you craft that book 1 to set us up for book 2, and how you do that, where you do close the loop of book 1, but still make readers curious to show up to book 2 and let them know that there is more to come. This is a great one to look at for kind of like series planning and series creation.
I agree.
Okay. So shall we move into character?
Yeah.
All right, let's talk character takeaways. So some of the big takeaways that I would look at for character development, I think I've got, because that last one on plot, right, kind of sits right on the line between plot and character, which we have spent this whole podcast series on this book trying to separate out the threads of plot and character and struggling to do that. So this is a great look at how to really weave together your plot and character so that you can't hardly actually pull them apart. So that's a freebie. If you want to look at how to integrate plot and character, this is another great one to study for that. But I think that when it comes to character development, I probably just have the one big takeaway that kind of complements with, the plot. And that's really to lean into, take the time to unpack the identities that your character, that your protagonist has, and to explore the relationship between those identities. I think that if you're more of like a pantser and you have to do that through the writing process, knowing that you need to discover that, and then you can, do your revisions in draft 2, draft 3, whatever, to integrate that into your story, or if you're a planner, to think about that. But to really explore the identities that your character, that your protagonist in particular holds, and then looking for the conflict between those, and looking for the through line of truth of my character has all these identities. Who are they really? What are they really looking for? And Dana, you said this during the character episode, at the bottom of everything, at the very base of in their deepest self, what is it that they are looking for? And how has that pursuit been impacted by these identities, and how has that pursuit been, helped or hindered by the things that they believe about themselves? And again, looking for the conflict among those identities and the truth within those identities, and how that plays out inside of your plot. That's really, that's probably 10 different takeaways, but that, you put them all together to really add those layers and that nuance to your protagonist. And again, give yourself room to explore that character. character.
Mm-hmm. I think for this story, it's a very interesting dance between the pursuit of truth and trying to discern between the lies. Alex's entire existence has been a truth in her mind, but because of what others perceived about her experience, it makes that truth shaky, and it makes it where she really doesn't have a firm foundation to believe. And in this case of this story, in the environment where she can get a sense of answers and clarity, it becomes even more murky. And I think what that makes me think in the pursuit of character is like, why is this character here? What is it that they want at the end of the day? And what are they willing to do to pursue that? Because she's willing to go to death more than once. Right. And you want that. And even if your story is not a life or death situation, life or death doesn't mean physical death. It can be the death of a relationship. It can be the death of a role or an identity. It can be death of a marriage. It can be so many different things, but it must rise to the level that we believe as readers that they're willing to take that chance and go on that journey. And I believe we all, I'm speaking for everybody, we will believe that she does, right? You're like, she ain't speaking for me. And so I think you want us to believe that, especially if you've gone through all this work and you want us to read book 2. Okay. So like nothing sells the next book like this book, right? And vice versa. And so I think that's probably one of my greatest takeaways of like, is like, why is she here? What are the things that brought her here? And what are the things that what will it require for her to have the outcome and the conclusion that she wants more than anything? And so I think this is a great book to be able to unpack that and to give someone, and I can think the final thing I think that with this story that is coming to me right now, which is at no point do you really, well, for me, I didn't get, so how do I say it? I didn't sort of just push it aside that this is just a college kid. You know what I mean? Like in romance, again, that's a big deal. The difference between like a YA, new college, and an adult romance. And in this case, her story was so multifaceted that you almost forget she's a 19, 20-year-old kid, right? Like she has so much life to live, but she's lived so much life. And I think that makes it so that you have a story in its essence that's universal. And in her journey and what she's going through, like that you can't just easily chalk it up to being, me, go keep living, baby. It's like you won't give in to, yeah, right. So I think that's another thing about the character, and I think it makes it so that we're not talking about it, but just a nod to you make your story a little bit broader and a little bit more accepting to how you decide to market it and who are your readers and who are your fans and how do you build your brand as an author. And so I think that made it also fascinating. Because it was happening and I didn't even know it was happening, which is a great thing.
Yeah, I want to just pause for a second on that, just to say that's a really good point about, this feels like such a like basic, choice to make about your protagonist, but their age, right? Like that does matter because to your point, in a different story, a 19-year-old protagonist, we might feel like this is some YA bull, like you're just being a teenager, whatever, like, versus like, because this novel was Leigh Bardugo's adult debut. She had written YA before. This was her debut into like adult fantasy fiction. And I think that it worked because, to your point, like, yes, she's 19, but the experiences that she has had is deep life lived. Like she's not some naive kid. And adults can read that 19-year-old because like adults have seen some life. Alex has seen some life. This is not a college girl with college girl problems. We're way past, just like, I have a crush on a boy. What do I do? Like we sailed past that a long time ago,
Yeah.
And so I think that, but I do think that it's important when you're creating your protagonist of thinking about their age and their situation in life, and who are you marketing the book to, and what are they meant to understand? How are they meant to feel about your protagonist? And just being cognizant of that, because it would be. I think sometimes we can either be arbitrary about, age just because it's like, I don't know, this seems like a good age, or, we can lean into a certain age range or time frame and we accidentally undermine ourselves because of that choice. So just being cognizant of that, being aware of that, I think is, if nothing else, it's helpful to know to think about it,
Mm-hmm. One final thing that I will say, and I don't have a category for this, so I will put it here with the character, which is I never really gave a whole lot of thought to the fact that what we would call her is morally gray in this story. That's how we would say it in romance, right? And it's an intentional category because some people may not want to read stories with characters that skirt the line of legal and illegal practices, right? Or how they either make their living or how the story unfolds, which causes us to have this sort of suspension of belief, right? And in this space, you have it that is being positioned as fantasy, but really it does go into that suspension of belief. And she has a lot of that, a lot of the things, whether it is drug use, whether it is sexuality, and a number of those things. She, both Leigh Bardugo, I think I got it right, and also Alex, when it comes to the exploration of these topics, and that to me is also a choice that's an extension of the plot, right? She needs that to be able to go where she needs to go, but it's also a part of her character because it has been a protective mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is an interesting thing because everything else is almost so noisy. You're like, I'm gonna give it that. Like, it's so many other things to be concerned about. When that one scene where that ghost popped out at the store, that was the moment where everything else, or when she was in that bathroom, I was like, listen, my heart and my brain just felt like I could not take it, but I couldn't stop reading. And I was mad, but I couldn't stop reading. And so I think it's almost as if because of the way she structured this character in this world, we gave her permission to go there. Her, not Alex, her, the author, to go there, and that we was willing to sit in the passenger seat and allow her to drive this thing. And I think for me, that's rare. And again, that's what makes this in itself, a masterwork. I believe, but that's something that, again, I wouldn't take that decision lightly, and I would be very intentional about what the themes that you want to explore in your story, so that it doesn't feel like it's just a thing you threw in. And I don't think any of the decisions that she made in this story were taken lightly. And so that makes it feel like assuring. But I think that if you can do it in a way, because of her having that fluidity between what she's willing to do to protect herself. Listen.
Yeah.
Alex ain't no punk. Listen, she said, listen, she gonna give it to you whether you human or you're a ghost. And so I think that also is an extension of character that also gave a lot of permissions and leeway in plot, in the storytelling, that I think was so good.
Yeah. And I know. I mean, then we'll wrap. I promise. We'll be done. But I want to say that I think one of the things that was really important in doing that, in the way that she did that, and so much of this is about, you know, how she told the story, how she got us along for the ride, how she kind of let us know throughout the book that we can trust her as the author. But I want to say too about the way that she set up the story. So there are things that happened that we were like, okay, I don't think that's what we were going to do. But what she does set up is the tone of the story. So the little snippet of the prologue, which brings it, which is it's like pulled from the end, right? Where we get a little bit of like Alex at the end of the story. We see her at the beginning. There, we know that it's going to get violent, right? Because she's, we see right at the very beginning of the story that she's like nursing injuries. She is, you know, badly wounded, and she's, you know, sort of like mentally and emotionally wounded in this moment. You know, we see that she's in really bad shape, and then it pulls us to, you know, backtrack to, you know, whatever, 3 months ago or however far back we went. But the first thing that we see, so we get that scene, so it tells us that it's going to get violent and Alex is going to get hurt. The first thing that we see is Alex at her first prognostication. And how do they, and I'm going to spoil this part because it's literally at the beginning of the story, so y'all will be fine. How does a prognostication work? Well, we take a guy, we feed him some stuff. The secret societies feed someone, not just any guy, but someone who is, I think they pulled him from, he was like a homeless man who was in a, what do you call it? Like a mental institution, right? So, where he was under the care of doctors because he, like, right? So they take someone who essentially is in a vulnerable position in the world, right? He has no family, he has no friends, he has this one nurse who cares for him. So first of all, from the get-go, she is introducing us to some of the themes of the story, that someone who is vulnerable is taken advantage of by people who have power in order to essentially promote their own interests in the world. So prognostication, so the scene opens with this man is being used for prognostication. And the way a prognostication works is he gets fed some stuff, they put him under, and then they open up his body and pull out his guts to predict the markets. This is, my dear listener, beloved viewer or listener, this is how the story starts. This is our introduction to this world. What she is telling us is that and this is something that she begins to pull out further and further over the course of the story, is that in this world, magic is not nice. Magic is not used to create happy endings. Magic is unpredictable, it is dangerous, and it hurts people. And it is used by the powerful to promote their own interests. And she is setting this up from the very beginning. So I think tonally, she is setting us up to understand that it's going to be a rough ride. And this is a world that is hard to survive in. And Alex is someone who is uniquely positioned to survive in it. And so I think that that's an important aspect of, you know, you can't just throw that stuff into a story, but she sets us up tonally and expectation-wise to know that it's going to be a bumpy ride, so you better buckle up, you know?
Girl, I need her to just she should have put a page. Hey, Dana. Just so you know, look, FYI, girl to girl. Listen, and it only gets deeper. Yeah, hence Dana trying to run. Because part of that, even when I was upset, I was like, Dana, pause for a second. And we don't talk about this and then we'll get to the next bit. We don't really talk about this, at least we don't have it slated to talk about. But everything about the marketing pointed it in that direction too. The cover, the darkness, the snakes, like I had to, I don't know why. I maybe I wanted pixie dust, you know, unicorns. I don't know. Yeah, I don't even read.
I was a little surprised that you looked at the book and was like, what do you mean they're starter?
Girl, listen, what kind of Mickey Mouse operation is this? But it goes there, and it's almost as if she wants us to know how far it's going to go soon. So when it goes there, you it's almost as if you shouldn't be shocked, but you are shocked. You are shocked. And maybe I'm speaking for somebody else. I was thoroughly shocked. Um, and it also gave her room to explore some things that you can't explore in any other capacity unless you have the trust of the author in the landscape is set up in such a way. And I think that was a way where it was like a nod to how fiction really can talk about the things that we should talk about and we should discuss, but it's hard to do that without stepping on toes and all that. And in this environment, it's like it was an open sort of lane to be able to explore, the topic of women and vulnerability in college campuses and sexuality and not in a way that we're gonna be having when we're swinging from the chandeliers, but
That's next month.
exactly. But I think she did such a beautiful job with that. But I think that's also going to character in Alex's unique situation with that topic because it's almost as if she's just been holding on. Like she has been just literally doing whatever it takes to survive. And this story is like, no ma'am, not today.
Yeah.
That was amazing. Okay, so that was character. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. Well, unfortunately, that was our right. We did plot, we did character. But I want to say like that's such a great point to kind of like close on is put your protagonists through their paces. Put them up against the things that are going to force them into that transformation, right? Make them work for it. Put them into the direction that you need your protagonist to go in order to transform. Tailor your plot to put them into the situations that are going to force them out of their comfort zone, that are going to challenge those identities, challenge those lies that they believe about themselves, and put your protagonist, like I said, through their paces and use your plot to drive them to become everything that you know as the author and that we will come to understand as the audience, everything that they are capable of actually being.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I think that consideration must be done in a sense, not in isolation of understanding your genre, your niche, your promise to your readers. And I think sometimes when you have authors like this, when you say, oh, this was her debut novel in adult, right, to make that transition, that's not something that all authors can do. So you also want to be mindful of that. But I think she set us up from the beginning so that there would be no misunderstanding about what you were getting yourself into, even though there was no way that we could have predicted what would actually happen. And I think, not only is that a choice, but I think she did it beautifully. And so I have my final question to you would be, what was one of the reasons why you read the book in the first place? And what are your thoughts now after having read it? And then not only read it, but studied it and had the experience of reading it with clients.
Yeah, so I originally picked this book. This book had been on my TBR for a while. And this is so weird to me. I came across an ad or I don't even know if it was an ad or if it was like someone had posted something. But it was like, if you liked Harry Potter, this is like Harry Potter but college. And that was the extent of initial, which I'm like, I would not compare this book to Harry Potter ever. Like that was an insane comparison to make because this feels like it shares nothing in common with Harry Potter. I'm glad that I saw that and was like, well, now I'm curious about like whatever the heck that means. But I would not ever describe this book that way, and I would not recommend that description to anybody. But because it was years ago now that I came across the book, so it was a while back. But it just had kind of like floated around in my head, and I would see it occasionally on, because of the kind of books I read already, it would come up on my like Amazon or Audible or whatever. And I really just chose it because I was like, okay, cool. This is it's in a school setting, which was something that I was looking for. And it is like magic and academics, right? This is sort of just like, and it was labeled as dark academia, which I think is correct. And that is a genre that I am generally interested in anyway. So, I mean, it was the now at this point, I choose books much more intentionally, but I came across this book at a time when I wasn't particularly looking for anything specific and just like stumbled upon it more by accident. Um, but I am so glad that I read it because once I started reading it, I listened to the audiobook first. I could not stop. I was listening to it all the time because it was really feeding like my craving for innovative fantasy. And then when I found out it was a crime story and you combined literally my two favorite things and the genres that I was like, I'm devoting my life to these two genres, which is crime and fantasy. I was like, great, this is everything that I wanted it to be and more. Now, what's interesting is when I read it with clients, my clients have variable experiences with it because when I read it with my crime clients, they don't come from fantasy. So they're like, what the hell? Right? Like, I mean, really, like they respond kind of like you did in a lot of ways, Dana, of like, I'm sorry, we're magic, portals, we have what? Like, this is just not their vibe. And so it takes, but this is like why, this is one of those things about reading outside of your genre where it takes like, okay, even if you peel back the fantasy layers, look at the execution of the crime story. Like, even if you object to just fantasy as a genre and you're like, I don't like that, I don't want it, set that aside and just look at the implementation of the crime and how she structures an investigation so that it's interesting. It propels us from scene to scene. And so I will tend to, unless my clients are like, hey, like this is a content issue for me, I don't want to read this. I will push them to say, read it anyway, because this is a great study in character. This is a great study in writing a crime novel. And so I will encourage them to read it beyond their like preference because of how well it executes on certain things. And then what happens with my crime clients is that we can triangulate with other crime novels that are more traditional crime novels, Sharp Objects, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, because those are the ones right here in my backgrounds. But so that you can start to pull out the patterns, but also see how well she executed on the classic patterns of a crime story. So that's kind of, I will continue to recommend this book. I'll continue to read it. I'll continue to talk about it. I'm going to be that woman. And hopefully a few more people read it and a few more people learn something from it like I did.
Listen, you already know how I feel about it. I think that is so helpful. It made me think also about that, like, I mean, we could have a whole conversation in general about setting and the fact of her wrapping it around this Ivy League experience and an actual place. But I agree. This is a great one. And so, before we close out this episode, for Ninth House, are there any sort of parting thoughts that rise to the surface that we have not discussed that you think is important to this book? And one of the things that that kind of stirs around in my brain, and I don't have an exact place to pinpoint it, but I think is I think this is a very interesting take on as a writer of this question of like, what are the kind of stories that you want to tell? And it's not a topic that's unique to this author, but I think her delivery is so unique that it's clear to see. And so if you are a person where it's like, how do I, fantasy is different than romance. In romance, it's like, how do I give them the same thing but different, right? Like everybody do the same thing the same way, but they don't. Okay, but I think it is a great way because even though the plot and the character are so tightly intertwined, you can sit back and say, oh, I love how she did this and did this and did this, so that you can almost sort of prop that element up and look around it and sort of survey, whether this is something that calls to you, or you enjoy and you want more of it, or it could even help you to have an offshoot of other types of books that you may want to read that may not be exactly like this, but it helps you to sort of be able to earmark a direction, because there's nothing about this that's like mediocre, or it's not lukewarm. It's not like she goes there on all accounts. And I think that's what makes this a really great read. Even if you find that that's not your jam, I think you could still get a lot from it. And I think the fact that we picked this as our first selection was a great pick. And so thank you for that. But I will say, she was like, yes, I told you. Yes. But I think finding books like that give you that sort of almost visceral response, that are closer to the proximity of the kind of stories that you want to create, are almost these force and functions for you to define what it is that you want to create. And I think that's the kind of story that this is. Even if you don't ever have to worry about me writing a story about Grace. You don't ever have to worry about me. Worry about somebody chancing going down the hill. I'll let y'all handle it. I'm good. But however, right? I think sometimes you have to have this, whether it's a discussion of art or her creative expression or her storytelling ability, like you having that, if you're in any sort of limbo of exploration of your voice, of how you want to use tone, of how you want to use theme, even in how you want to use suspension of belief, because she weaves that as well. I think this is a great one, and I think it's a great book to not just read, but even to discuss. And so that probably would be I think the final thing that I have about it, because it's a great one.
Yeah, no, I honestly, I can't top that. What am I going to say on top of that, please? But I do think that this really does make a nice like bookend from like with the beginning of the podcast and what we were talking about, which is that this is one of the reasons why it is so important to read, and to read outside of things that you would maybe normally pick for yourself, because it gives you the opportunity to explore different styles, different books that like different tones of books and stories, and begin to explore, what do I want my stories to be? How do I want my stories to make people feel? Or what kinds of topics am I interested in exploring? And then finding out, how do I explore those well? How do I do them justice? How do you write? All of these things are what you can begin to glean from reading. And I think that's why reading as a writer is so important, so that you can get that exploration and see how other people pulled it off, and see what kinds of and to measure your own experiences of books, right? To help you calibrate, what kind of experiences do I want to create? And again, how do I handle different subject matter? And how do you handle it well? And how do I make my themes powerful and resounding without feeling like you're reading a book where the author's just banging a drum and all you hear is the author trying to say something, all of these different things that are a part of the art of writing, and how reading books from other authors can help you find your own voice and find your own tone and find your own style of writing.
Mm-hmm. And it also is a great indicator or potential mirror on the reading experience, whether it landed. If we picked up what you were putting down, like, it's a great opportunity, and it helps to also be able to have a gauge for making adjustments when we don't get it right. As writers, right? Like we need to fix it. And it's like, okay, well, where and what was it, and what about the delivery? And I think sometimes it's easier to see how those layers may be present when you are looking at someone else's work than yours, because you are all up and through it. And so you sort of have to remove yourself. And when you have a space like this, then you can. It's awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So with that said, I think, listen, we have done the daggone thing and we have explored Ninth House. This was our first pick for our podcast. We hope that you have enjoyed this. Rachel already spilled the beans. I guess we will announce that the next book will be Things We Never Got Over and by Lucy Score. And we are looking forward to having some dialogue about, which I love. I think is a crazy book to come after this. But I think Lucy's up for like I'm saying her name like I know her. I think Lucy's up for it. Um, any parting words before we close out this episode, Rachel?
Nope, you've heard honestly more than probably you ever wanted to hear from me talking about this book. But I just thank you for hanging with us. This is our first go around. We're so grateful for anyone who wants to come on this journey with us. We are two people who love books and we love each other, frankly. And so we love talking to each other. We love sharing our love of books and the insights that we gain as we read books. And so it's really, we appreciate your patience as we figure it out, but we also, if you guys have comments or questions or things that you're like, oh, these are the kinds of problems I run into or whatever, let us know and we're going to keep growing and we hope you'll join us.
Yeah, and also add any sort of questions or comments that you have about this book, because we don't know when, but in the future, we'd love to do an episode or two just with Q&A, because I think we explored some things that as a writer, when you hear it, you got to let it digest a little bit and then maybe go and do a little bit of writing or a little bit of exploring and come back, which we will gladly take a look at that as well. And yeah, so if you haven't done so already, and make sure that you subscribe. We don't even know where we are when we're recording this, but we're sure we're going to be somewhere.
And I'm sure that wherever it is, you can subscribe to it. Please do.
Listen, subscribe, put up some 5 stars, do all of that. And listen, this is going to be our vibe. We want you to have a great time. Like, leave the headaches for when it's time to write. Right. And we look forward to seeing you in our next episode of Story Deep Dive with Dana and Rachel. Take care and have a great day.